Hello, my name is Christy Alosio, and I am a marital, individual, and family counselor in Carmel, Indiana. And today I want to talk a little bit about therapy and kind of give people a little bit of insight into what therapy is and what therapy is not. I think if people haven't had their own therapy experience, then they don't really know what to expect or what really goes on. They may have heard some things that are not true or things that scare them about therapy. And today I want to just kind of clear the air and talk a little bit about what can you expect from the family systems type of therapy, which is what kind of therapy I generally practice. So so much about therapy is having some insight, being able to take a look at ourselves and being able to try to figure out what we need to change in our life and what is not working. So the first thing I want people to know or understand about therapy is therapy is a place to come and heal shame. It's not a place to come and be shamed. And unfortunately, some people have had therapy experiences where they, quote unquote, get their nose rubbed in the carpet, so to speak, especially with marital counseling. If somebody's had an affair, if somebody has an addiction, sometimes they come to counseling and end up feeling more shamed or feel a little bit beat down, because of things that have happened. And, I'm not saying it's definitely not okay to have an addiction. It's not okay to have an affair, but coming in and hearing how bad you are isn't necessarily going to help it, because a lot of affairs and addiction are come from a place of shame to begin with. And so, it is my goal to help you heal the shame that you feel, to be able to give yourself grace for things that have happened, not only in your marriage, but in your life, and for the couple to be able to figure out why it happened in the first place. When marriage couples come in for marriage counseling, it's not about finding an identified patient. It's not about saying who caused the breakdown of the marriage. In my opinion, it's 100% and 100%, for each person of why the marriage is where it is. We meet somebody, and when we start dating, we immediately start doing this dance, and we do this dance for years and years and years, and when all of a sudden it's not working, and that says, well, it's your fault because you're an alcoholic, or it's your fault because you had an affair. But there's two people that have been doing the tango for so long. It does take two to tango, and what is the dynamic's been going on, and why do we pick each other to marry in the first place? So those are all real important things. And so the first thing I want you to know is that I don't ever want anybody to feel shamed or criticized in my office. I am going to tell you some hard things about yourself, and we are going to be real about it, but at the end of the day, I want you to be able to understand why things happened and why we all do things that we do. So that's lesson number one, is I don't want you to fear that you're going to come in and be criticized. Don't let that keep you from working on yourself, because that's not a good thing. You already have some things you need to heal, and staying away because you fear judgment is not going to work for you. So the second thing is, I think some people feel like therapy is just a place to come in and wallow in self-pity and wallow in self-loathing, and that is absolutely not true in my office. Do we talk about past hurts? Absolutely. Do we talk about pain that happens in marriage? Yes. I mean, do people have so much pain sometimes about their spouse? Do they almost hate them? Yes. But we're going to work through that pain. It's not about just bringing the pain up and feeling like a victim and poor me. It's about healing the pain. It's about talking about some of our childhood traumas and being able to heal and grieve and do some of those things. It's about talking about the affair that our spouse had and not wallowing in the poor me, but saying, how can I start to heal this pain and move on in my life? Victims are helpless and they're powerless, and you are not. So I do not let people sit and feeling like a victim. I do not let people wallow in misery, because that is not going to work in your life, and it's not going to change your marriage, and it's not going to change your happiness. And feeling like a victim and having bitterness and resentment is like a cancer, and it'll eat your marriage alive, and then it's going to eat you alive. So we need to work on that. And it's not that we don't talk about past hurts and past resentments all the way from your childhood up to your marriage, but we heal them. We do something with them. We don't just lay them out on the carpet. We try to work through them. We try to find some closure, some healing to go along with that. So the next one is, therapy is not so much about communication skills, but delivery goes a long way. I don't work with couples a whole lot on just basic breaking down of communication skills because it doesn't work. It's a band-aid fix. Working on how we communicate with each other does not change 20, 30, 40 years of instinctual behavior that we do for a reason. So, I will point out some communication stuff here and there, but it's more about if we change some of our beliefs, change some of our paradigm, change some of our patterns, then, changing the communication isn't going to be top priority. It will naturally start to change as we change. I don't want you guys to come in here and get a band-aid fix. I want it to be a long-term healing process for your marriage, and just teaching communication skills, in my opinion, is just we're going to throw a band-aid over it, and 6 months, a year, 2 years, that band-aid's going to be ripped off and we're going to be right back. So that's kind of the first part about the communication. And then, talking about the second part, which is delivery goes a long way. It's a little hard for me sometimes over here in the therapist chair. I hear a wife, we'll just use a wife for example, and she's sharing like really legitimate concerns, and she's sharing legitimate hurts, but it's coming out in such an angry, victim-y way. The partner, the husband, is never going to hear her. And I'm like saying, what you have to say is so important, but the delivery is keeping you from being heard. And that's not the only dynamic. There's more dynamics than just that are probably keeping her from being heard, but delivery goes a long way. Being empathetic, being vulnerable, being soft, all goes a really far way in your marriage, and will help you guys grow as a couple and help you grow for you. I mean, nobody wants to be walking around seething anger all the time. It's not a good feeling either. So that's kind of the next piece is, working on the way that we talk to each other, but at a much deeper level than just changing our communication patterns. So the next part of what therapy is and what therapy isn't is therapy is not always about feeling better, at least at first. And, sometimes people leave my office and they honestly feel worse than when they came in. But the whole goal is triggering that pain for you now and giving you something to process and work on is what makes you feel better in the long run. So to me, it's solely like working out. No pain, no gain. I mean, you don't go to the gym for the first time and leave like, whoo, I feel great and this is awesome. And you're sore the next day and it takes you a couple days to recover. But then you're like, okay, after I've been doing this for a little while, I've got more energy. I feel great. So that's very similar to what therapy is. I feel like it's my job as a therapist is I'm just going to hold up a mirror and I'm just going to say, this is who you are. And the problem is we don't always like what's looking back at us. And that's the initial owie that people get is, oh gosh, what did you just say to me? And that hurts. But then they go home and they sit on it for a week and they're like, oh my gosh, that is true. There is something right about that. And I don't like that about myself and I want to change it. And you cannot change it until you admit it. And you can't change it until you say, I know this is a problem and I know this is something that I want to make different. So it's my job to point those things out, to kind of be the fire for you to say, I want to change this. This isn't working for me. If somebody perceives you in a certain way, if I say I perceive this about you, it may not be 100% true. It may not be 50% true, but there's a reason that I see it. Or even if somebody else would point it out, there's a reason that they see it. And so for you could take it in to be defensive and say, yeah, but, and say that it's not true. Or you could take it in and say, why do people perceive me this way? And if I don't like people perceiving me that way, is there something that I want to be different so that people don't perceive me that way? And that's what therapy is I want you to see yourself as others see you, because that's the only way that you can change. It's easy to point out dysfunction in other people. It's really hard to see it in ourselves. And that's what makes therapy painful, is sometimes we have to learn things about ourselves that we don't like. But the really positive of that is, wow, I see it now, I can admit it, and I can make it different. I am powerful, and I am able to do that. So, and the last one is, therapy is not as much about change as it is about understanding. And so I say this, and people are like, well, Christy, I'm going to bring my spouse in here to try to fix my marriage, and they're not going to change at all. That's not the case. People do some changing, but it's really not as much about the change as it is about us really understanding our partner, being empathetic, understanding where they're coming from, and stop internalizing what they do. So if I had a couple, his stepdad was, not very nice and verbally abusive and critical. And so for him, it's painful when his wife criticizes him. And even if it's not on the same level, it still kind of triggers that for him. And so, a little kid that is trying to protect himself in that situation shuts down, and they learn the less I say, the less I do, the less likely I am to get hurt, the less likely I am to need to protect myself. So I'm just going to kind of stay in my shell. And so whenever he's feeling that way, he shuts down, and she internalizes and say, well, what's wrong with me, or what's wrong with our marriage? What's going on here? He doesn't talk to me. He doesn't open up to me. So bringing them in therapy and him being able to sit on the couch and being vulnerable and opening up about some of those childhood hurts, all of a sudden she sees it and she's like, his clamming up and his sucking into his shell isn't about me, and it isn't about what kind of wife I am. That's about his pain and his way that his brain taught him to protect himself as a child. And we develop those defense mechanisms as children, and they work really great as kids, but we carry them into adults and they don't work very well in relationships. And so, the next time that, after he shared that in a session, the next time he clams up, hopefully she can get to the place where she says, I know this isn't about me, because before, he'd clam up and she'd be pounding on him like, open up, open up, open up, which is, only triggering that more for him and making him suck more and more into his shell. So therapy is so much more about understanding our partner, trying to understand their vulnerability, why they act like they do, being empathetic and understanding. And that is eventually where the happiness and the connection comes in a marriage. There's nothing more connecting for a couple than to be able to be real with each other and be vulnerable and open about current and past hurts that they've experienced. And that takes a big level of trust that is provided in this therapy room. So I hope that helps clear up a little bit about therapy and what therapy is and what therapy is not. So if you have further questions or you want to make an appointment, I will see people individually and as couples. Please contact me. My email is ChristyFamilyTree. That's CHRISTY familytree @live.com.